James, a very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Mike, and a very busy week it is as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couple of questions for you. I understand you voted along with the committee yesterday to pass the report into the annals of history, obviously then believing that Boris Johnson did deliberately mislead Parliament. He's now calling for a truce with Rishi Sunak, apparently, after what happened yesterday. I mean, it's not a very, what you might call, great day for the Tories, is it?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by a truce. Clearly, I'm not exposed to that particular story.
Well, it's not what I mean. Sure. It's what he means by a truce. I don't know what he means by a truce either, but I mean, basically saying he doesn't want to have a war with Rishi Sunak, which he did want to have a few days ago.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I wouldn't have used the word truce. I mean, there's no need for a truce because ultimately we had a vote last night. It was a free vote. It was a vote of conscience. It wasn't whipped, quite rightly so. And MPs voted individually on what they felt.
Yes, and not very many voted against the ruling of the committee, suggesting that Boris Johnson doesn't have an awful lot of support in the parliamentary party.
Well, I think there's 2 points to note there. Firstly, he did make it clear over the weekend that he didn't want people to vote against the report. And, of course, only 7 did, which would indicate that the support isn't there. But of course, the figures are pretty overwhelming. I mean, 350 plus voted in support of the privilege motion and 7 against. So I think it was a case of, a slam dunk.
Sure. And did you think that at the time when Boris said the things that he is now said to have misled the Commons about, that he knew he was misleading the Commons?
Well, that's what the conclusion was for the Privileges Committee. I mean, I have no option but to accept that finding. It was a select committee. It was formed in good faith. They've had lots of legal advice. They've pored over this for months and months and months. And it's quite unprecedented, for a report to be had on a select committee report. And it's also quite unprecedented, in my view, for MPs to vote against it. So I think ultimately I felt obliged last night to vote in support of that report because I'm a respecter of parliamentary authorities and a man of integrity. And I think that we have to see the writing on the wall and accept the findings of that committee.
But surely, if you're a man of integrity and the Tory party is a party of integrity, as Rishi Sunak says that it is, if your former Prime Minister and your former leader has been found guilty of deliberately misleading the Commons, leading to him being banned from it for 90 days and leading for him to be having his pass rescinded, is there not grounds then to suspend him or sack him from the party?
Well, I mean, I think there are those that would argue that the sanction yesterday was too heavy. I mean, certainly when I first saw it, I thought, wow, 90 days and the loss of his pass is pretty significant. And actually, I was minded originally to abstain, but it's clear the mood has changed across Parliament. For those that were at the debate last night, it was absolutely clear-cut. The vast majority, if not all of those that were there last night, voted in support of the motion. And in many ways, it is time to move on.
And Rishi Sunak decided not to be there for the vote. There are some who say he could have come and sort of buried Boris Johnson once and for all if he had voted, as you did, in favour of the committee report. But he chose not to do that. Was that a mistake?
Well, I think the important point, Mike, I didn't vote to bury Boris Johnson. It's not an anti-Boris vote. It's a pro-democracy and a pro-parliamentary authority vote, and that's why I voted the way I did last night. It was the right thing to do. In terms of the Prime Minister, he was clearly otherwise engaged, but it was a one-line whip yesterday. MPs weren't compelled to be there. But to address your point specifically, I think Rishi Sunak did the right thing. The last time we had a whipped vote on a matter of conscience was the Owen Paterson vote, and it caused an absolute riot. So entirely right yesterday for it not to be a whipped vote. It was an individual matter as far as how we voted as individuals, and I think the right outcome was achieved.
Yeah, I mean, you might call the Owen Paterson vote the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson, right?
Well, look, I mean, if I'm being very candid with you, and I try to be candid, I was loyal to Boris right until the end. Charismatic individual, very colourful character. I love working for him. But there were a number of errors of judgment which coloured his time at number 10. And I think ultimately, when you look at the totality of the Barnard Castle issue, when you look at Dominic Cummings, Owen Paterson, Chris Pincher, partygate, it's left MPs like me in a very difficult situation. And if you believe in parliamentary authority, if you believe in integrity, then I think the vote last night was the right thing for many of my colleagues to do.
A lot of our listeners and viewers have said to us over the course of the last few days, even before Monday came around at the weekend, that, you know, surely enough is enough. There are many more important issues to talk about. Net zero in the Sun poll this morning showing that people are not happy about the way that MPs treat them. They don't think MPs understand their cost of living concerns. They don't think they understand the net fact that they don't want net zero. They don't want to pay for net zero. You know, they've had enough, basically, of this green crusade. Cost of living crises, mortgage payments going up. There's surely a lot more important things to talk about.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, going back to the report last night, I mean, that has been a huge distraction for all of my colleagues. And my inbox has been full for 3.5 years on matters pertaining to Boris Johnson and the other unfortunate events over the course of the pandemic. I think that what we have to be doing now as a government is focusing on the issues that really matter, and that's what we're doing. So cost of living, getting inflation down, supporting households, illegal migration. I mean, that's where I'm focused right now as an MP. And that's firmly on supporting my constituents in Bracknell. And at least now, having drawn a line underneath the events last night, we can now move on.
I mean, I saw a bit of a chink of light in the old migrant story this morning. I read a story about an Egyptian fisherman who's been sent to prison in the last couple of days by a judge who basically said that he wants to send a strong message to migrants crossing the English Channel that they will face sanctions if they come here illegally. This man by the name of Hamouda Chitoui said that if he'd known he was going to be locked up, he wouldn't have come. He might have finally found the solution.
Look, I mean, this is a very sensitive issue, but I'm clear on my views on this. UK's been a soft touch for migrants for too long. And if you look at where we are now post-Brexit, the unique situation the UK is in is that we've actually got the ability now post-Brexit to pass laws through the chamber that make us sovereign again. And we're doing that. And actually, we are now going to be in a position to sort this issue out. We need migrants. We've got, you know, a healthy requirement for people to come and work in the UK. We're a hospitable nation, very proud record of offering safe haven to people from all over the world. But what we can't afford to be is a soft touch for those seeking to come here illegally. And that's exactly why the illegal migration bill is the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a way Boris Johnson becomes leader of the Conservative Party again?
Well, I mean, I don't think so personally. I think Boris is a fantastic, colourful character, but his copybook may well have been blotted by the events over partygate and other issues that I referred to. We've got a great Prime Minister now. Rishi Sunak is doing a great job. He's understated, he's calm, he's decent, he's cautious, he's very clever. He's got all the big calls right, as you'd expect. And actually, I'm very confident now the future of our party. The polls will close. The offer is excellent. I've no doubt at all that next year for the general election, it'll be a really good battle.
OK. And what about these two people who have been named as the recipients of honours from the Boris Johnson honours list, who are part of this party that went on, the Jingle and Mingle party, which has now become rather more famous? I mean, I'm not generally in favour of retrospective punishment, but it seems a bit unfair that these two have got honours that they can pick up and move on with.
Well, I think it's interesting that the Mirror ran that story over this weekend, you know, 3 years on from the incident or thereabouts. And, of course, we came before the Privileges Committee vote. So it wasn't a coincidence the story was run. But I think, like most of us rational people, it leaves a bit of a nasty taste in the throat. I think that honours and awards should be given to people that thoroughly deserve them. I spent a long time presiding over honours and award systems when I was in the MOD, for example. And ultimately, I think people have a right to feel slightly aggrieved by it. But by the same token, the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and Liz Truss are entirely in their gift through parliamentary protocol to put that list in. That's a gift. That's a gift that sits with them, and I think we need to support that. But hopefully, we all use our judgment in getting it right.
James, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you. James Sutherland, a Conservative MP, former military officer there, giving us his reasons why he thinks that Boris Johnson's time is basically up, but that he voted not to kill off Boris Johnson, rather to preserve the democracy and the democratic rights of the House of Commons. I still think many of you will say it was a waste of time and a waste of money, and it doesn't really matter now what happens to Boris Johnson. This is TalkTV.